We finally got it. That annoying slate that we have at least once each and every year where some chalk gets hurt. We have a lot of injuries. It's bummer as like a football fan perspective, it's like a human perspective. And then there is a DFS angle as well. And it leads to a lot to break down from a DFS perspective as we look forward to week number 4. We got to go through all those bummer injuries, outline what they mean going forward, and how to view the guys stepping into larger roles from a DFS perspective. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, joined here as always by Brandon Gadula. He is the senior managing editor of numberFire.com. Brandon, week 3 was gross. How are you?
It's been better, but I can complain about all, effectively everyone I rostered in daily fantasy getting hurt, but trying to keep perspective that at least I'm not the one getting hurt. So
true.
I always try to remember that when I'm tilting about injuries. Just feel a little human about everything. But it was a tough week. No one wants to hear about the season-long leagues, but I had a lot of
No one wants to hear about season long. Season long stupid. I can get that take. This is the proper format for me to get that take off. Because I'm not going to insult. I mean, I might insult some people by saying season long is stupid, but I don't care. I'm right, so it's fine.
But
enjoy your waivers tomorrow when you're doing it for 6 hours on Tuesday.
But sometimes I can fall back and be like, all right, at least I moved up the standings. I got trashed by some players with questionable roles who had huge games, so that's So, I mean, look, not a whole lot.
You're facing a lot of Jelani Woods lineups?
No.
Tread
Chase
carefully
Edmonds,
because I've got him in some dynasty best balls where he's looking.
That's a different format than like a 10 or 12 team.
If he's gonna score 2 touchdowns
Chase
for every
Edmonds
eight routes
Devin
he
Duvernay.
runs, if we can get 2 touchdowns for every 8 routes that Jelani Woods runs, I feel like that 3rd or whatever round pick it was for tight end premium is going to be great. So I'm okay with it. No complaints here. I find nothing to complain about on this.
Okay, so Jim goes
beautiful
from
Monday
saying
morning.
season long. Jim goes from saying season long dumb and no one cares about it.
It's not season long.
It's
dynasty
about
best ball. I don't have to fill out waivers. I don't have to fill out waivers. The biggest issue.
That's even worse.
No, there's no waivers. It's great. What do you mean?
But that's even worse to talk about, like a dynasty league where you just get points for whoever happened to go off. Yeah, which is apparently is how everyone that I played against in season long leagues. That's how they got their points.
I care deeply about Noah Gray's 8 routes per game. I care deeply about Jelani Woods' 8 routes. I used to care about Tommy Tremble, but he's dead to me. So I care deeply about this. I could not care less about whatever backup running back is now going to be on waiver wires and stuff like that. I don't need to worry about that till the offseason because it's best ball, bro. I get to hang out. So
I like a best ball. I was just saying, DFS didn't go great. My entire core, for the most part, combined for about 30 snaps across their games.
Yeah.
And, sometimes you have that fallback where you're then like, I'll just dig into my season-long matchups and root, and then it doesn't go well. So it was a rough week, but hey, here's the thing, Jim. There's always next week.
There's always next week, and I can tell that we are among the right people here because over on the FanDuel YouTube page, on the live comment section, One-Eyed Jack said waivers are so Y2K. Could not agree more. Fully on board. You're in the right place, One-Eyed Jack. Will we not be discussing waivers ever again? We're going to talk about takeaways from week number 3, what it means from a DFS perspective, and much more throughout the show for today. But first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. We have twice weekly NFL podcasts, Monday and Thursday. Preview show coming up on Thursday for the week 4 main slate. We also have MLB still going for the rest of the 6 weeks, 6 decades. The MLB season is still going along. PGA. I'll be back on that eventually, but Brandon is doing that solo when there are good weeks as well. We have NASCAR, UFC, et cetera, all in the same place. So search for the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review as well. The 2022 NFL season is underway, and FanDuel and GMC, in case you hadn't heard, by the way, it's underway. FanDuel and GMC are back to bring you the GMC Sierra Mountain Climber Pick'em, a free-to-play contest series that gives you a chance to win a share of $10,000 in FanDuel site credit every Sunday, courtesy of GMC. Here's how it works. Every Sunday during the NFL season, you'll have a chance to answer questions based on that day's non-primetime games. The more questions you answer correctly, the higher up of the mountain you'll move. If during any week you answer every question correctly for a perfect score, you'll reach the summit and win your share of $10,000 in site credit. Contest series is now live at FanDuel.com/free/contest/GMC today to start climbing that mountain. Let's dig into the week 3 headlines for today. Typically, we have 2 separate sections. One is the headliner, one is the injury section. They are one and the same, coexisting for this week because the headliner for week 3 is the injuries. Let's start things off here with the biggest one. David Montgomery left early for the Bears and did not return due to a knee/ankle injury. I have not seen any updates on what the severity of that might have been, but he was ruled out pretty fast. So don't know. I was on a plane, so I couldn't check Twitter. So I was watching the scroll on the bottom because I was watching TV on the Delta thing. So I could see what's going on. But I have Twitter and I just see David Montgomery doubtful to return. And you just get to experience tilt as they did in the 70s, which is I'm sure they're sweating their DFS lineups back in the 70s. I'm sure that they were super thrilled to see the scroll say that David Montgomery was doubtful to return. Khalil Herbert dominated the backfield with no Montgomery, 61% snap rate with 20 carries and 2 targets. He ran 13 routes compared to Treston Ebner, who ran 5. They seemed like Herbert quite a bit. So it's a flawed offense, Brandon. But what's your view of them, of Herbert specifically, if Montgomery does miss time?
Yeah, I mean, not to douse this one too much, but Montgomery is considered day-to-day. So this might all be moot. But if we get this backfield, frankly, without one or the other, then there's more value here. Maybe I was a little too high on David Montgomery. I mean, he wasn't a full-on total core play for me. He was, I think, someone who I viewed as undersalaried, but
he was pretty much a core play to me.
But entering the week, we saw Herbert play 25% of the snaps, which is not nothing, and it's generally indicative of the type of role that someone would have if the starter gets hurt. If they go from not seeing the field, then we can be a little bit more wary. But we see someone on the field getting touches, doing things with it. He was overperforming from a rushing yards over expectation standpoint entering the week, and then you see the workload and the results. This week it's it's a flawed offense, but it's flawed in the sense that it's actually look, you want points and you want the team to move the ball, but for a running back, volume is kind of crucial unless you're Cordero Patterson and you run for 15 yards a carry. So volume is not the worst thing, specifically at running back. So, I mean, the arrow would be way up on Herbert. That's not a big surprise, but his workload was great.
What kind of salary are we talking here if Montgomery doesn't play?
So I liked Montgomery at 71.
Mm-hmm.
Despite the fact that is it David Montgomery who has the meme photo of vision of this superstar running back and legs of this. Okay, so I don't quite view him like that, but I kind of like Khalil Herbert, and it seems like he maybe did a little bit more with his opportunities than David Montgomery. So what I'm getting at here is if I liked Montgomery with Herbert kind of still in his side a little bit at 71, I feel like I would have to put Herbert by himself, in the right. And again, that's not completely terrible, around 74 with that kind of workload.
Yeah, I think I agree with your line of thinking. I might be higher on Montgomery as a player, I guess. So I would say
than Herbert or than I am.
Than both.
Okay.
I think he's a good football player. I know I'm alone in that, but I think he's actually he's turned into a pretty good football player. So I'd probably go 72. So I'm nitpicking just a little bit lower though. But I think 72 for a guy who's probably going to get a majority of the early down work, 1 or 2 targets or so, in a team that, they're flawed, but they're not a complete dumpster fire. Wins don't matter, but they are 2-1. They're not a good offense. But they're also not the worst offense we've ever seen in the history of. They can move the ball on the ground. So I'd say 72, 73 is probably where I go for Herbert.
So Khalil Herbert, 72. Next week they get the Giants, who will be on a short week. And then Montgomery, because again, he's day-to-day. He's also 72. So I think it's probably safe to say that, let's say there's no Montgomery. We're probably into Herbert at that salary, although just a spoiler alert, we go through these games like as they unfold and as natural on the podcast, but that game's not going to sound appealing, but very, very few games on next week's main slate actually sound appealing. So I normally contextualize that better, but
so for next week, the next week on the main slate, the highest total is 53.5, which is great. That's Bills and Ravens. Great game. Love that. Second highest total is 48.5, but that game includes Seattle, which means it's a bad game for DFS. Yes. Like that is the rule there. Third highest total is 47 for Eagles and Jags, which is actually really fun. I think you didn't list it in your fun games in Slack yesterday, which I think is disrespectful. And how dare you?
Pretty sure that was the second game.
Was it? Okay. Well, I lied. Sorry. I didn't mean to disrespect you by saying
I have Jacksonville, Philly, and Buffalo, Baltimore as the two games I considered.
There was one other one that I was looking at that I thought looked fun. Let me try to find it.
Good luck.
There was one other one. I know.
I bet I know it.
No, you don't. Well,
it's not Arizona, Carolina.
No, it's not. Okay. They're dead to me. It's absolutely not.
Hey,
honestly, that's a disrespectful
only 13
thing.
times.
It's only 3 times, okay? It's only 3 times. And I'm
dating back into last year, though.
No, but that was successful last year. Kyler Murray won me a lot of money in week 1 last year. So, you're lying. Okay, anyway. And James Conner won us a lot of money, too. Like, let's chill out here. Okay, buddy? Okay? I can't find the other game. I think it might have been thinking of the Jags and Eagles because that game actually is fun.
I think you probably were, and I think you probably were certain that I didn't list that game as a game I liked.
Yeah, I got nothing else. That's literally it. It's just those two. Okay, so my bad.
So normally I'm like, okay, well it's Bears Giants. It's going to be a gross game. I got to bump that down, but there's not a whole lot of that for next week because of the main slate. So again, to finish that thought, Herbert without Montgomery at 72, like it. If Montgomery plays, I think Herbert's going to take too much work.
I think they're both cross-offs if Montgomery plays.
Then you can't play both really at that salary.
Yeah, I agree. Dalvin Cook left early with a shoulder injury. He was pretty quickly ruled out for the game. Pro Football Talk is reporting that Cook is expected to play week 4, but he has a history of shoulder injuries. So I don't know. I think there's at least a shot. We need to discuss this. In a negative game script there, Alexander Madison played every other running back snap. Kenny Nwangwu was active, but Ty Chandler was inactive. We've seen Madison get featured in the past when Dalv has missed time. So are you assuming that'll be the case again if Dalv can't play in week 4, or would you be worried about having Nwangwu and Chandler lurking there for the Vikings?
So 2 things. 1, it would depend on salary, which is always the case. But 2, they play in London next week, so they're not on the main slate. So it's not the type of thing that we really, really dice up. And it sounds like with Cook expected to play anyway, by the time I'm assuming on week 5 they'll be on the main. Well, I guess they'll probably have a bye after London, but so we might not even have this affect a main slate. So that
talk about it. Could talk be relevant for like a single game stuff.
Okay, sure. Dalvin Cook expected to play. I'm not going to play Alexander Madison.
Okay, but what if he doesn't? That was the point, because he's had a history of shoulder injuries. There's a possibility he doesn't play.
Yeah, then sure. On a single game slate, you have to consider Alexander Madison.
I'm not talking about considering. How do you view him? Do you view him as being like a featured back in that situation, or do you worry that they'll mix in other guys because they actually have burst as running backs?
Then, well, I love Alexander Madison, but
why?
He just had good rushing stats in college. So
okay, despite being slow, despite being running like a dump truck, I would worry. So I think that if, hypothetically, we get Madison to not play in this game, I would take if we get Cook to not play in this game, I would take Madison from 2021 when he was the full feature back in place of Dalvin. I'd downgrade that 15 or so percent, probably under the possibility that Nwangwu will get some work because he's returning kicks and stuff like that. Obviously, pretty electric with the ball in his hands. And Ty Chandler looked good in the preseason. And there were reports that they were receptive to potentially trading away Madison. So I think there's at least a possibility he loses work, especially because both those guys are very, very fast. And Kevin O'Connell comes from the Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan kind of background. they do value speed at that position. So I would just take Madison's workload from when he's filled in previously and downgrade that a little bit to account for the fact that there's a possibility in Wongwu and Chandler mix in.
Sure. Let's say this game's on the main slate. What salary are you thinking for Madison?
78?
I think that's too high.
You think it's too high?
Yeah.
So I'm higher on Madison than you are somehow, despite that long back and forth?
Yeah.
Okay. Why?
Doesn't really excite me enough.
I mean, he had a great workload last year. If you downgrade that 15%, that's still worth 78, I think. Like, if you took his role last year, it was worth 85. So, like, off the top of my head. Anyway.
Right. Well, it's hard for me to wrap my head around stuff that is too hypothetical because it's not
hypothetical. You can play.
It's not in the main slate. Dalvin Cook's supposed to.
You can play single game daily fantasy. You can play Sunday, full Sundays. There are other things that exist other than just the main slate.
That's true. That's true.
Gosh, poser. Anyway, same game. Talking about DeAndre Swift here. Dave Burkett noted on Twitter that DeAndre Swift was nursing his left arm after the game. That could help explain why Jamal Williams got so much work. They're actually out Snap Swift 43%, 42%. Craig Reynolds worked in a weird amount as well, which tells me that Swift was probably actually hurt. And that's why I think this is pretty noteworthy here. Williams, 20 to 33 running back carries. He had 2 out of 7 running back targets. Swift had 4 in that game. So Swift had this ankle injury. Now potentially has like a shoulder or something. Let's just talk about this hypothetically. Brandon, we've talked about Williams in the past. If Swift missed time, has Williams' role this year been good enough where you'd be pretty high on him if Swift were to be unable to go, whether it be the ankle or the shoulder, whatever it may be?
Yeah, I think so. He's also been playing to expectation on the ground in terms of his rushing numbers. Trust me, we know he can get red zone work. So I think that there's a change in how I'm viewing Jamal Williams than I did last year a little bit. He's in a good game environment next week. So I think I'd be more receptive to Jamal Williams this year than I was last year. Probably, let's say, no Swift next week. It's like 73.
Yeah, I might be a little bit lower because he ran the same number of routes as Craig Reynolds, and Justin Jackson could mix in for passing game work. So I would expect him to not get a lot of passing game work, and that does impact things. But the reason why I'd agree with you and that I'm higher on him now than I have been is that this offensive line is like mauling people despite having some guys miss games. I think they've had a starter out every game so far along the offensive line. So they're going to get healthier up there. Jamal Williams could easily pay off for DFS, even if he doesn't get passing game work, because he's going to get goal line work. He's going to be efficient as a rusher. He'll get a couple targets. So I had been hesitant on Williams, but if we get him without Swift right now, he'd still be pretty viable. I would say 71 is where I'd put him once factoring in the concerns around the passing game work.
He's 74.
Okay.
So then you're higher on Madison without Cook than you would be Williams without Swift.
Yes.
Despite Williams playing in a vastly better offense.
What? Do you realize they scored fewer points? Literally scored fewer points than the Vikings yesterday.
Jim, I was setting you up.
Oh, because of my boy Jared Goff?
Yeah.
I've shifted.
I've shifted
to Marcus Mariota again. I go back and forth, Baker's dust. So I had to choose between those two at this point. Okay. So
I'm sorry.
So
that explains Cordell Patterson's efficiency then.
Of course.
Okay, I got
you say this as if you're like saying it jokingly, but like you're right. It is because of that. That is because of Mariota.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Come on. But yes, you're right. It is a better offense because he's the best quarterback of all time. I'm sorry, you're right. Fine. The Saints offense was awful on Sunday, and both Jarvis Landry and Michael Thomas got banged up. Landry has an ankle injury. Thomas's is to his foot. Even with them playing a decent chunk of the game, specifically Thomas, Chris Olave, 13 targets, 147 yards. Your air yard stuff, hyper pertinent this week, Brandon. So good job by you. Traquan Smith had 105 receiving yards. Ran the third most routes behind Olave and Thomas. We were high on Olave entering the week. So going forward, how big could his role be if Landry or Thomas were to miss time? You're on mute.
I mean, there's really not much of a
Just
ceiling.
kidding. Sorry. You're back. It was just delayed, but you're back.
Oh, okay. Well, there's really not much of like a capped ceiling here.
Mhm.
He could get a lot of work, a lot of downfield work, which is obviously high value targets, but also some shorter targets as well. If these two guys are out specifically, he had 7 downfield targets, which for me is 10 plus yards downfield out of his 13 overall, 93% route rate. Also someone who, if you look at the full season stats, he's still going to look quite good, but in week 1, his role was a lot smaller than it morphed into in week 2, which is something that we talked about. And now, it can grow. He can run every pass route. So, I mean, the arrow has to be way, way up. I was trying to look at Alvin Kamara's workload in this game as well. 60% snap rate, 7 targets. So maybe there's a bit of a pulse there. But yeah, for Olave specifically, love it.
Yeah, I think that Olave, I just feel very good about. Like, I think even if, like, let's say Jarv and MT wound up being totally okay, I would still be happily going towards Olave because he had 13 targets with them both being fully active last week, 13 targets this week with them being partially active. I think the Saints are realizing that they can't be as conservative in the first halves of games because it has not worked. So maybe they decide to open things up a bit. I mean, maybe not because Jameis is hurt, I guess, but like, I think we might see some sort of shift there philosophically to ignite the offense earlier on, as opposed to just playing catch up the entire game. So that's all positive. As far as Alvin Kamara goes, 15 carries, 7 targets, a 70% snap rate. He also had 3 out of 7 red zone carries. Now, the one thing I would say there is that with Taysom Hill being banged up, that's one factor that was not in the equation yesterday in terms of the red zone work, because he can lose some work there to Taysom Hill. But I still think overall it was pretty encouraging for Kamara. So he's also not in the main slate next week, but where are you at with him right now in terms of your feel for him after his most encouraging usage thus far?
A little bit better, an expected FanDuel points workload of almost 17 points. The problem is I don't know how often he's going to realize that because the offense sort of, it's not the worst offense. Of course, catching 2 of 7 targets isn't going to help. It's going to make a pretty big gap between expectation and reality there. But again, you can't just look at FanDuel points and results. I know people love to inform me that that's all that matters. But if you just go off of that, you're going to be missing a lot of potential. You're going to be basically buying high on guys who convert and not buying low on guys whose roles are better than their production indicates. But I still would have issues, which is so weird for Kamara. But I would he was, I think, 7,000. I had no interest this week, effectively. Maybe like 75, but
yeah, I think that's correct. Because it accounts for the limitations within the offense, but then does bump him up for a better role. So I think 75 is probably where I'd be too. They're facing the Vikings on that London game, so not in the main slate, but I think it was encouraging usage for Kamara. And I feel, 10% better about him this week than I did entering the week, which is that's a good improvement for sure. 10% is noticeable from a bump perspective. Mac Jones left in the fourth quarter with an ankle injury. X-rays are apparently negative here, but sounds like he is likely to miss at least some time with a high ankle sprain. They asked Bill Belichick this morning about this, and he said he didn't want to speculate about whether Jones would go on IR. So it sounds pretty definitive he'll miss time. Brian Hoyer will probably start. Let's say unleash Bailey Zappi. Let's go, baby. Typically, an injury to the quarterback would mean that the team is a cross-off, and, typically this team is a cross-off. But I think it's at least worth discussing here because Ramondre Stevenson had a 60% snap rate for the second straight game. He had 12 carries and 5 targets. Devontae Parker had 10 targets with no Jacoby Myers. 8 of those were deep for Devontae Parker. So just getting chuckers from Mac. Brian Hoyer, he tends to play as if like it's the Brian Hoyer show, which could be fun. If Mac sits, which it sounds like he probably will, we're probably not going at these guys, but I do at least want to ask, are Stevenson and Parker of interest to you if we don't get Mac Jones in week 4?
That one would depend specifically on the matchup.
It's against Green Bay.
So
20-point total based on the way Green Bay has played and the way New England has played.
Yeah, 41-point total. Green Bay's favored by 10.5.
So their implied total is like 16.25.
I don't know. One thing that kind of jumps out to me with Mac is that he has been throwing it downfield a good bit. His ADOT's 10 yards.
Mm-hmm.
That ranks him 4th among starting quarterbacks behind Jameis Winston, Lamar Jackson, Marcus Mariota.
I think part of that for Mac might be related to the fact they've been trailing pretty big in 2 of those 3 games.
But it's still a willingness to throw it downfield.
And I mean, with how bad they've been, we can expect them to trail going forward.
If they're 10.5-point underdogs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we don't chase volume for quarterbacks. Is a 10.5-point spread assuming Mac's out?
Yes.
I figured. So let's say he plays.
It would be 13.5 if you were playing.
So look, there's going to be some volume here. Stevenson could be in play from like a bring back stack, a lot of check down work. He's going to be the guy who gets the routes. I don't know if I'd get to Parker. Mm-hmm. I think he would be popular after a pretty big game. So I would be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit lower here, but in the right spots, maybe.
Yeah, I think it would really depend on salary. The problem is the Patriots running backs never get super low salaried, no matter how bad things get.
Give me a salary for Ramondre then.
I think based on his workload and based on the assumption that Brian Hoyer plays and has a little bit of Hoyer time, I would say that's like a 61 kind of salary.
He's 59.
Okay, that's respectable. That's at least low enough where it's like, okay. You know, you can give it some consideration. It's not the worst idea in the world.
Parker's
I did see
57.
Devonte Parker's. Yeah, that's too high for me.
Yeah, I think so. Again, a lot of these games are going to be ugly for next week, so I have that in the back of my mind. But
yeah,
one thing I will say about Stevenson, at least, is I think one of my trends for this week is going to be looking into just running back workloads and look at how maybe dispersed they are, because we don't have.
Yeah.
There's really not a running back right now who I feel like afraid not to roster based on workload. So I think I felt that a lot building
lineups this week too. There wasn't really. I kind of felt with Joe Mixon, and I'm ashamed to say that now because he played like poop. But I did feel it a little bit there. That was kind of the only one. I no longer feel that with Joe Mixon. Shockingly. AJ Green suffered a knee injury in the 3rd quarter and did not return, gave a route bump to Andy Isabella. But I think the bigger thing here is we saw all the targets go to Marquis Brown, Zach Ertz, and Greg Dortch. All those guys had double-digit targets. Part of that's because Kyler had like 69,000 dropbacks, but because they played like poo again. So Green may be potentially missing time, could concentrate things more, but how much does it mean for you in a Cardinals offense that has been just poop for the first 3 games outside of the second half against the Raiders?
Yeah, all their first half numbers are horrific. But I guess like if you're going to be a negative script, and like the raw numbers are inflated, but Marquise Brown still had a 31% target share, 44% air yard share. Mm-hmm. Kind of surprisingly, only 5 of those 17 targets were 10 yards downfield. His ADOT was 8.0. Receiver average is about 10.5, let's call it. That's not what you expect to see with Marquise Brown, but the volume's there. I think the issue is that his salary is not going to come down.
Yeah,
from where it was.
But it's only 7,000, which I think was a little bit low for his role.
Were you really tempted?
Yeah, I used him.
Well, sure, but like, were you like, oh, this is like too low?
I felt pretty good about it. Yeah,
like I felt way better about like T Higgins at 73 than Marquise Brown at 7,000 last week.
Yeah, but that's probably like I think that T was pretty good too.
But I'm just like trying to contextualize. Like I wasn't like, oh, I need to get to Marquise Brown.
I think Marquise Brown relative to the high 6,000 guys was much better. I think compared to T. Higgins, it's like maybe not, but like compared to those guys, he was. So if he were to stay at 7,000, like, yeah.
Okay, so I said already that I expect his salary not to go down. I assume it would go up based on the production attached to this game. So I'm at least a little bit covered there because I saw his salary. Name me a salary for Marquis Brown. They're at Carolina next week if that impacts things, but where are you expecting? You think it'll stay about the same?
Yeah, I think I would say like I think I would probably want a salary around like 73 or so.
It's 77.
Okay.
He has had double-digit targets in consecutive games, but you're effectively banking on this offense.
77 is a little rich. Like that's higher than I thought.
Yeah, I thought it was going to go up to like 75, and I thought that would be a little bit high for me.
That's a little high.
You're basically, again, the market shares were good, but for that to turn into what you want it to be, you need passing efficiency. You need teams to be in the red zone to score. Yes, Marquis Brown can score from outside the red zone, but a very small portion of touchdowns come from outside the red zone. So I don't love it.
Yeah.
I think he's oversalaried.
What about a salary for Dortch and Ertz, considering how bad the offense has been? And that the Carolina defense played pretty well on Sunday and has just generally been fine.
So they both played at least 80% of the snaps, had at least 85% of the routes, 10 targets each. Wow, Greg Dortch's ADOT, 3.6. Kyler Murray's ADOT has to be tiny.
Yeah. His ADOT or his height? Which one are we talking about here?
Whoa. What is his ADOT? I'm just curious here. 6.0. That's not good.
It's a real Justin Herbert number.
That's a 6.0 from a team trailing a lot, or at least like not moving the ball. That's not what you want to see. So Ertz, I don't mind as much, and also for Dortch, just because that's more of his role. I think I'm lower on Brown because the ADOT is more suspect. So Ertz, I'll say like 57.
He's 55.
I was going to say 56, but that felt a little bit low. Dortch, he should probably be like 6,000.
He's 53. So
okay.
Dortch is actually interesting.
That might be a write down for main lineups.
It's hard to find. It's been hard this year to find low $5,000 receivers who had a good role. Assuming there's no Rondale Moore again, Dortch is pretty good down there. It's not like Olave at 55 this week. It's nowhere near that, but it's not bad. For a guy who actually has a path to 80 or so yards, that works.
But in the context of a slate, we'll do the salary scroll later, which is always my favorite part of the show. But within the context of the slate, knowing there's not a ton of like shootout games, presumably there aren't a lot of studs in great spots. So, one Greg Dortch at 53 could like really feel, because the thing about like rostering low salaried receivers and just players in general is the opportunity cost of not rostering a stud. But that also then would apply and trickle down through the lineup where like the mid salary or the mid tier guys are probably not in great spots either. So
it's interesting. Dortch at 53.
Yeah.
Okay. So no injury section, because that was the injury section. So let's move now to role changes from this past week. Joe Mixon alluded to it before. He played like poop. So basically I've said poop like 6 times in the show. So we're going to cut that word out from now on. No more saying that word, Jim. Vary your vocabulary. He played like the S word, so he got benched late for the Bengals. Samaje Perine played 33% of the snaps. He had 9 carries to Mixon's 12. He played better than Mixon too, like just looking at it. Mixon was hobbling around a bit, but I think this is more performance-related than injury-related. Mixon, 12 carries, 7 targets, 38 yards in scrimmage. He actually had a good role if you look at like his like numbers outside of his snap rate. Like his role was, quote-unquote, role was good, but I think everybody has rough games, which is true, but how much does this lack of performance and then subsequent performance by Perine impact your view of Mixon going forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough with this offense because we expect it to be fantastic, and it just hasn't been. I mean, Burrow had a great first half, but as I don't really need to like rehash and dig in, but losing to Pittsburgh, not able to score basically with an overtime, losing to Dallas, and then putting up 27 on the Jets. I'm not like the hugest Jets hater, so it's not like a joke there.
Right.
That's worrisome. I will point out that the Bengals had the highest increase in pass rate over expectation from, if you look at weeks 1 and 2 compared to week 3, the biggest jump there. They were below average entering, plus 9.3 points there, which is one of the higher marks of the week. Maybe they just sort of try to air it out, which is always a bit of an issue because of the sack problem that this team has, but that's going to take some value away from Mixon. Yes, we want targets for running backs, but if they're willing to do something like this, then it gives me pause to plug in Mixon into a cash game lineup. So I think the salary has to come down, and I'm sure it will because the results weren't there. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
I agree with you. Like it adds more uncertainty into a situation. Whereas like we were like, I was very into him at 82 or 83 or whatever it was because his workload was very good. He was in, I mean, the Jets defensive line played legit. It was not just the Bengals, like, messing it away. It was also like the Jets played well along the defensive line. That's why they couldn't run the football. It's probably why they were more pass heavy than they have been. But, the Bengals offensive line still trying to gel, still trying to get cohesion up there after a lot of changes in the offseason. So I don't really think that rushing issue is going to go away necessarily. They play the Dolphins on Thursday. That game will actually be really fun. I just don't know. Like, I don't know. I think that Mixon, there's more uncertainty there. I'm still expecting to be like a good role, but it's not going to be the great role. Maybe they give him more breathers or whatever it may be.
He's got a 21% rushing success rate, according to Next Gen Stats, and per game he's averaging 16 yards under expectation on his carries.
My goodness.
That's not what you want to see.
That is not.
I mean, still,
like, you could see it. He was frustrated during that game. Like, he looked mad. And that probably compounded and led to some of the issues. But like, and like Samaje Perine, he's only had 11 carries this year, but a 55% success rate based on numberFire's expected points model, whereas Mixon's at 29% there. So like, I'd expect them to take some work off of Mixon's shoulders. He's not going to get benched, obviously, but like scaling him back a bit to give him more breathers.
Yeah, and still 26 adjusted opportunities, which is carries plus 2x targets. And if you look at the full season now, he leads the position with 32.7. Like,
but that's going to come down now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I was going to get there, but
yeah. It's been a good role. Like I said, if you look on paper, like his red zone role is good this week too. So it's like, if you look on paper, it was good. But it was bad outside of that. Devonte Smith
was good, but it was bad.
Yeah, it was.
It was good, but
Devonte Smith was already running a lot of routes for the Eagles, but a much better target share in week 3. And like, he looked like a dude. Like, can we get like a next gen stat number for that? Like dudeness, because he had a lot of dudeness in him in that game. Led the Eagles with 12 targets, 35% target share. He's at 25% for the season now. Dallas Goddard got banged up, hurt his shin during this game. So I was too low on Devonte Smith coming in personally. Where are you viewing him now going forward after his dudeness in week 3?
Yeah, I mean, it's bumped up, but I will say it's not just the results, it's never really about the results that gets me interested in stuff. Hopefully that's clear by the 10th year of doing the show, it feels like. But he got targeted on 13% of his routes in week 1 when AJ Brown was just the guy. Then 21% in week 2, and then in week 3 it was 34%. So it was either a case of, or partly all of these, but like they wanted to feature AJ Brown in week 1. Are you stopping me?
I'm checking one thing quick. Okay, never mind. Continue. I thought there might have been something else at play there, but there was not.
What was it?
So one of the notes.
Did you interrupt me for a narrative?
No, it's an actual thing.
Okay.
One of the things later on the show we're gonna talk about is Jeff Okudah for the Lions. He was on Justin Jefferson pretty much all day yesterday and shut him down. I was gonna look and see what his route. What Devonte Smith, how often Devonte Smith saw in week 1. He did run against Okudah on 47% of his routes. So I'm guessing that was like a first half thing. They're like, okay, we're going to put Okudah on Devonte, but then AJ Brown was just like crushing their soul. And they're like, we should change this. And Okudah did, AJ Brown did run 23% of the routes against Okudah. So like, I think that might have been partially explaining Devonte Smith's weird usage. I think Jeff Okudah might actually just be good potentially, and like that's influencing things for both Jefferson and this. And I think I might not have accounted enough for that when trying to evaluate Devonte Smith and saying, okay, week 1 is a fluke as opposed to week 2.
So, okay, yeah, I thought week 1 was more fluky than I did not think AJ Brown was going to get targeted on like 40% of his routes.
No, I more so meant like expecting Devonte Smith to have a 20 or 19% target share as opposed to like 23%, which is I think what he had entering this or has now or whatever. So,
okay, I mean, I could see that. Yeah, I mean, I love Jalen Hurts this week. It was I didn't play too many lineups. I had a more tight lineup distribution this week. I spread a lot of that out toward AJ Brown and Dallas Goddard, which was fine, but missing out on Smith's or not fully taking advantage of like the Smith game was. I'm not saying like, yeah, I predicted this. That's not what this is, but I was expecting his role to improve, not necessarily to this degree, and also to these results. It's important to like, yeah, he had a 17.5 yard ADOT. He had a catch rate over expectation of 21%. Like big games from receivers come from converting on your chances at an outlierishly high rate. That's what he did. But the underlying workload here was still really good. Mm-hmm. It's been getting better. So that's why I'm up on Smith, not necessarily that he just had a 169-yard game.
Yeah, so Devonte Smith so far this year, if we include week 1, include week 2, include week 3, that's what this year means. 24% overall target share, AJ Brown 34%. AJ Brown and Devonte Smith both have 38% of the deep work so far this year. And in the red zone, AJ Brown is at 42%, Devonte Smith 17%. I think that like
so if I weight those, I have AJ Brown at a 35% weighted target share, which accounts for all that kind of stuff, and Smith at 27%, including week 1, week 2, and week 3, aka the full season.
So to you, is it AJ Brown 1, Devonte Smith 2, or is it 1A, 1B?
Still 1-2, I think.
I agree. So we're higher. I'm higher at least in Devonte Smith than I was, but still viewing AJ Brown as the number 1 here. And that's not a knock on Devonte Smith, more so an endorsement of we still like AJ Brown a lot. Breece Hall got a pretty big boost in his snap rate this week. He played 51% of the snaps. Michael Carter 49%. Passing down specifically seemed to favor Hall. He finished 11 targets compared to Carter's 2. Carter did out carry Hall 11-8. It is worth noting they were in a negative script, and if it was Hall getting the passing game work, that could play a role there. I will say, though, I thought that Hall was in on third downs a lot early in that game. I've not checked next gen stats to fact check this, so I should have, but I was busy. So I haven't gotten a chance to check that. But it did kind of seem like Hall was getting work early on third downs. So I would rank Hall above Carter right now from a DFS perspective, and I'm not using him in DFS yet, but he's on my radar, where he's a guy I'm monitoring week to week. Where are you at on this backfield right now?
It's going to be hard to get excited about them from a DFS standpoint unless I really, really change my outlook on how I invest in running back, which I might. I've already started to, but I'm never really open to the idea of like a full value back in a timeshare unless there's nowhere to spend at running back. Mm-hmm. So for me to get to this team is kind of asking a lot. As far as the first half snaps go, I
just pulled up the third down snaps. Okay. So third down snaps for the entire game, 18 snaps. Breece Hall played 15 of them. Michael Carter played 2. Ty Johnson played 1. So he's the third down back, but he's also getting some early down work. That's not the worst role.
No, it's not. It's not the best offense either. But again,
he's about to get Zach Wilson back.
Is that a good thing?
How dare you? It's better than Joe Flacco, I think.
So they play Pittsburgh next week. Let's be realistic about this. What's a salary you would need for Breece Hall to consider playing him? Because that game, you're not going to really stack that other side of the game. Mm-hmm. We're going to have a lot of Jets games where we're not really stacking one side or the other.
So I feel like I probably don't really want to go there because it's Wilson's first week back, and I think they're going to be pretty conservative with their game plan. We'll talk about that in the philosophical changes. But like, if I weren't accounting for Wilson having his first week, I would say that Hall's role in that matchup is probably worth around like 63. So a bit above where I had Ramondre even at 61. I would say 63 is where he should be.
That's where he is.
Okay. Where would you have said?
Like 6,000. I might need a 5 in front of that to play him, though.
I don't think that's entirely wrong, to be fully honest. Like, I could see being lower on him, but he's going to play every third down, basically. And he's gotten double-digit targets twice this year. I know, again, they're changing quarterbacks. They've thrown way too much so far this year. But I think, like, radar is at least up for Breece Hall going forward. We'll probably have him in role changes quite a bit, if I had to guess, just because it's getting a little bit better. Jared McKinnon outsnapped Clyde Edwards-Helaire in week 3, 51% to 41%. Both those guys had 7 carries and 3 red zone chances. Overall, Edwards-Helaire had 5 targets. McKinnon just 1, but McKinnon did run more routes, 18 to 15. I like this game a lot, to my detriment. Didn't even consider CEH at all. So he was already kind of a write-off to me, partly due to salary, but where's he at for you right now entering week 4?
Get him out of here. I mean, he was like game stack consideration only, and that was like if I like the other quarterback in that game, and I really want to like just sort of onslaught that kind of game stack, very rarely, if ever, we'll have the interns check all the tape, but
yes,
I don't know if I've ever been afraid of not playing CEH, and now I feel even less afraid of CEH, but not on the main slate, so that helps.
Yep, I would agree. Okay, Dameon Pierce saw a lot of work on Sunday. 20 carries and 2 targets, 61% snap rate. Rex Burkhead at 39%. Burkhead did still have the better receiving role, 16 routes there compared to 8 routes for Pierce. Pierce had 8 red zone carries on 12 total plays in that area, which is a really good red zone share. But I feel like it's kind of status quo. Like, I know he had production, but I don't think his role changed. I think it's exactly what it was in week 2. What about you?
So I don't think it changed a lot, but I think people will view it differently.
I think it's worth discussing for that reason. Yes.
Yeah. Like there was a drive where he basically ran from the 50 on multiple rushes and then into the end zone. And it was like, wow, like this is probably it. And then I dug into like the usage numbers and I was like, it's still not flawless. I probably should have considered him. I think he was 58 this week. The simulation model I run liked him a good bit. But those are the types of players that I usually just don't go to because I feel like there's not enough of an upside from, especially in a game that I thought would be completely dreadful. I'm probably a little bit higher having seen the results, which I know sounds contrary to what I just said about Devonte Smith, but in this offense, I need to see results on that volume because it's not a guarantee. Some guys have a lot of work and don't do a whole lot with it in bad offenses, maybe like a Najee Harris, something like that. But I think I'm a little bit higher on Pierce, just definitely not like, wow, this is the value back that we just keep targeting.
Yeah, I think that like the question I always ask for backs like him, where they're very unlikely to get passing game work or like get enough, is like, can I get burned for not using this guy? And like the answer is yes, but like the odds of him burning me are not super high. Like this week, good game, 101 yards from scrimmage. He had a touchdown, still 17.1 FanDuel points. Like you're not turning that down at a value salary, but he's not a value salary anymore. I saw his for next week. It's not a value salary anymore. So I feel like I still don't have a lot of like fear of getting burned. Fogba. I don't have a lot of Fogba with Pierce yet, given the offense, given the lack of passing game work. So I'm still just kind of status quo on him. Like, and that's probably lower than consensus.
Yeah, I think we're about the same.
Yeah.
And that seems like it's probably lower than consensus, which is, maybe a mistake on our part, but it's 6,800 for next week. Playing the Chargers, probably going to be trailing.
Did you watch?
Maybe.
I mean, the Chargers get a pass because they faced the two best quarterbacks in football the past 2 weeks, and Patrick Mahomes and Trevor Lawrence. So I get it.
What's that spread?
Chargers
by 6.5 on the road.
Yeah. I think he's going to get a lot of steam this week, and I hope he does, because I think that, like, I don't get a lot of spots where I can deviate from the chalk and feel good about it. I think this would be a spot. If he gets steamed up, I'm okay deviate. People will talk about the Chargers rush defense, et cetera, et cetera. I kind of hope he gets pushed up this week, because, like, there is a lot of value in catching passes, and Rex Burkhead is still doing more than him. It's a flawed role still.
I don't know if we've really done any comps this year, but this feels a little bit like a Damian Harris comp, where, like,
I can see that,
not quite the same offense, but, like, yeah, if he can get scripted out, he can also, have a lot of red zone work and score twice, maybe if they're lurking down there.
Mm-hmm.
But that's his path to beating you. Now he's up around, I feel like 68 is like the Damian Harris salary after a good game, and then it'll kick back down to like 63, and then eventually he'll do it again. So that's kind of the vibes I'm getting.
Yeah. I would say that, like, I'm just bumping up the odds he burns me for not using a meter a little bit. Like, that's all I'm doing. Baseline is still the same. Ceiling's a little bit higher, but it's still muted relative to where it should be. J.K. Dobbins saw his first action since 2020. Kind of got eased back in, as was expected here on a pitch count. He did play 44% of the snaps, which is actually kind of higher than I thought it would be. Justice Hill played 48%. Dobbins, 7 carries for 23 yards. He ran 13 routes and had 2 targets. In the red zone, Baltimore threw 9 times and ran 4 times. Dobbins did have 2 of 4 carries there. So the role will likely increase as time goes along. So where we have for Dobbins entering week 4 specifically?
Another spot where I'm probably, like, going to be lower than consensus always, just because I hate how this team uses their running backs, which is very rarely, if ever, throws to them. Although he did have 13 routes, which is about 40%, and those 2 targets. Ultimately played the 44% snap rate, but in the first half, he played 62%. I think I'd need to see his snap rate more stabilize around 60% for me to want to play him at whatever salary he's going to catch. So I have a hard time thinking about a realistic way where Dobbins earns a role within this offense that I end up rostering him, frequently. So I'm probably lower than most.
I think the fully realized version of him will be someone I will want to use in DFS eventually, because the Ravens are much more pass heavy now than they were last time Dobbins was healthy. So, like, his passing game role then was not ideal, but they're a pass heavier team now than they were. Lamar's playing pretty well right now. So we have pieces of this offense. And they haven't used running backs in that way, but they've also been playing with Mike Davis, like the ghost of Devonte Freeman, stuff like that. This is, once he gets back to being in his full self, it's within the range of outcomes. And, like, it's not like the target competition is that big outside of Mark Andrews and Rashad Bateman. So, like, I think the fully realized version of J.K. Dobbins will have a ceiling for DFS. I just think we'll see it slow played a bit to get there. If I were projecting a snap rate for next week, I would say 55% or so, which is respectable. Not high enough for me to get to him in the best game of the week yet, but, like, I think the fully realized version of him will be someone we can roster in DFS.
Okay, so best game of the week next week. What's the salary got to be tempted?
Okay, so 55% snap rate, probably 15 carries, 2 targets, great game environment, very good offense, 62.
He's 58.
He went down for some reason. Why is that? That's odd.
Why did he go down?
His salary went down.
He got 5 FanDuel points.
Who cares?
Everyone. Literally everybody just cares about what you produced.
So 58's low enough where, like...
Right? I mean, we'll learn a lot about the position at running back for next week during the salary scroll. Maybe it's a week where, like, yeah, I guess I'm going to play some J.K. Dobbins because maybe there's not a whole lot of running backs in great spots.
That's way lower than I thought. I thought he'd be 65.
I thought he'd be like 64, 65 as well, and that was going to be too high.
So you were lower on him than I was. What's your read on him now that you know he's 58?
I would consider him at this point in the week, which is literally as early as possible with looking ahead. I would consider him, assuming that running back is bad, for
which
next
is
week.
a fair assumption based on the overall game. Yeah, overall slate.
Yeah, we keep like teasing it, but we're getting close to the salary scroll. So I would consider him. I would not have if he was around like 65, like I thought he would be.
I agree. We've talked about Austin Eckler's role previously. That overall role was bad again this week, potentially because that game got out of hand, although they kept Justin Herbert in there for some reason. But the red zone role also stinks for Austin Eckler. He was losing goal line work to Sony Michel previously. He has 4 red zone opportunities the entire season across 25 plays. That is a 16% share. I think he was around 34% in his fully healthy games last year, and even that was kind of low. Like you talked about this in week 1, he had a lot more touchdowns than you'd think. That was compared to his red zone role. His red zone role has now gotten worse. His overall role has gotten worse. I honestly don't know if I can use him in DFS, even with the pass catching still being fine. They get Houston next week, so I should be on Eckler, but like, I don't know if I want to be. Where are you at on him right now?
I mean, another spot where we were lower on Eckler in week 1, just have been lower than basically salary. If we say salary is expectation, lower on Eckler week after week after week. The efficiency is really bad on the ground, 25% rushing success rate, averaging about 8 yards under expectation per game. Not that there's a whole lot there because he's expected for 35 on about 11 carries a game. So, like, to underperform that, not ideal. But I mean, it is what it is. Mm-hmm. It's. I'm trying to think. I've been trying to think of a comp role, but there really aren't because he's not viewed as like a part-time back.
Okay. How about this? His role's kind of like Breece Hall's. If Breece Hall actually like had a good offense. The
one that came to mind for me was like, probably not this year, but in years past, like a very inefficient Aaron Jones. Like where the salary's up, you're still tempted a little bit, but like
maybe. I guess from that perspective, I was more thinking from like how he gets used perspective.
Sure. But I mean like the usage of like moderate carries, but like fairly good receiving still. But I guess the red zone stuff isn't quite the same with Joe. There's really not a good comp. So give me a salary for next week with Eckler, where you think he should be, and then we'll figure it out.
Like 67? That might even be too high.
What about you? This is one of those spots. This is one of those spots where, like, if you just blanked out the name, you're like, okay, this team has this implied team total. They're favored by this. Like, here's his role. Be like, 66 or something. I don't know.
84.
But like, eventually, he's gonna have like a multi-touchdown game.
I know he's gonna totally like shove it to us, but like he'll score 2 touchdowns and have like 60 yards. So that's 18 points. That's not gonna kill me if I don't have it. So, especially at 84.
At 84, you really got.
Can he get 30 points right now?
Only in a game where he scores twice and they're trailing a ton, and he's like, "Oh yeah, he got 14 targets and caught 13 of them," and like, that's kind of the path to his getting that.
Yeah. So let's give him a touchdown each game. He has not scored yet, but I know we talked about his red zone role being bad, but let's give him 1 touchdown per game. If you add 6 points to his FanDuel point total for each game so far, he'd be at 15.2, 19.9, and 15.3. That is with touchdowns. He would be there. And again, in the red zone role is part of the thesis of being lower on him. The Fogba is low here as well. Mac Hollins, Fogba is there. He got a lot of run with no Hunter Renfrow. 44 routes on 46 dropbacks. And one of the reasons he didn't run one of those routes is because he was the passer. So he basically ran a route on every play that he could have except for one. He converted 10 targets, 158 yards. I also had referenced Darren Waller's route rate on the preview podcast. It did go back to where it had been previously. With they ran more 2 tight end sets with Renfrow being out. But Renfrow might miss more time. How would you view these Raiders pass catchers if Renfrow does miss another game?
Would like them more if I guess Derek Carr is literally as good as Aaron Rodgers, according to Devonte Adams. So I should probably be higher on this team as a result. But I think Mac Hollins is fun. Obviously, I still like Devonte.
Mhm.
If I like the game environment, one of those spots where I'm assuming here,
Denver at home. So it's indoors, at least.
oh gosh, that's going to be an ugly game. That's going to feel like the game of the week where there are plays, but there aren't plays.
Are there plays, though? Where are the
No,
plays?
it's going to feel like there should be plays.
Oh, yeah.
So in week 1, Devonte Adams, 10 catches, 17 targets. Since then, averaging 3.5 catches on 8.5 targets, catch rate over expectation of minus 16 points, 24 yards a game. He's been bailed out with touchdowns, so he's going to have a good red zone role. That much is certain.
Mm-hmm.
I know this is probably more about Mac Hollins, but I think Devontae's just more interesting, frankly, because his salary's high and we know that he can burn us. You would just expect a little bit of a better workload.
Mm-hmm.
Than what
my guess, this is just a hypothesis, but I'm guessing teams saw what happened week 1 and saw Carr's efficiency when throwing to non-Devonte Adams people and how bad it was, and we're like, okay, we can just devote every resource stopping Devonte and make him burn us elsewhere.
So why don't
kind of did with Hollins? Kind of did.
Why don't teams do that with Cooper Kupp? Why is he always open then?
I mean, I don't know.
Like if teams can do that, but like it's
my theory is that Cooper Kupp is good at football. Not to say that Devonte Adams is not, but
yeah, don't say that.
My theory is that Cooper Kupp is good at football, which does buck previous Jim's thoughts on these things, but whatever. He did fumble last week again, just for the record. Vindication. I was right.
So yeah, I would say the arrow was way up for me on Devonte after week 1. Mm-hmm. I was kicking myself a lot for not being higher on Devonte. Now I feel a little bit more vindicated because Derek Carr is like not my favorite passer. So I feel like this is a little bit more of what we should expect if you look sort of collectively. I'm probably not going to fear Devonte, and that could always scare me, but
I think that like the upside is still there. It's more so that the floor is much lower, and that's something you don't deal with Kupp. Sorry, the median expectation is something that's much lower than we might have thought, and that's something you deal with Kupp.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be sky high with Devonte. I thought he would just be penciled in for. Mm-hmm. I mean, he had 10 targets, but like the production just wasn't there. So I'd say Devonte is probably like an 82.
I'd probably still go 84, 85 because of the ceiling.
Sure.
But
Darren Waller was 64. He should probably be like 6,000.
Oh, really? I felt better about him. Now, I guess if Mac Hollins is going to take work away, then yeah.
Darren Waller's salary has to go down because he didn't produce. It's just the way that it works. Mac Hollins higher on. Afraid to chase it though. Like huge catch rate over expectation. 26 points there in this past week.
Yeah,
everyone saw the production. The role's really good, so I'm not like, no, this is a Jelani Woods like 8 routes, 2 touchdowns thing. It's very different.
Keep Jelani Woods' name out your bleeping mouth.
But I think the salary is probably going to climb too high, and we're probably going to then try to buy high on a guy who's not going to do that every game. So I don't know, like weirdly, like everyone shifted a little bit, but not drastically, I guess.
Yeah, I would say that like I was worried that to steal a Rich Rebar line, I was worried that Hollins would just be doing cardio like he was in week 1, run a lot of routes, but not getting a lot of usage. I think now that that's not as much of a concern. And he's a consideration for game stacks, but I don't really want to stack that game next week. So that's a bump up.
Okay. So Devonte 79, does that appeal to you?
Yes. Because I think the ceiling is still there. That's all that matters. Because I'm not playing in a cash game. So if I'm looking at ceiling, the ceiling is still there. So yes, I think 79 is a buy low potential spot. Yes.
So I was wrong with Waller. His salary went up to 65.
Okay.
It was up 100.
And what's Mac?
And then Mac, scrolling, 58.
Search. Okay. 58. That's high enough where I'm not as itchy to go there. So
He's got a sweet headshot though.
he does. Matt Collins is awesome, man. Like, I always got annoyed with him because he like had basically the same number as Mike Gesicki when he was with Miami. I think he was 86 and Gesicki was 88. And it's like he catches these touchdowns. It's like, oh yeah, Gesicki touchdown. It's like, no, that's Matt Collins. You moron.
Well, he did the too small thing in the end zone after scoring, which I always appreciate.
That's great. Okay. Speaking of Raiders number 2 wide receivers who weirdly occasionally pop, Zay Jones had a solid usage day on Sunday. Former Raiders receiver, I guess I should say. Led the Jags with 11 targets. Christian Kirk had 9. Marvin Jones had 7. Across 3 games, Kirk does lead with a 26% target share, but Zay Jones second at 23%. Zay Jones, I have to keep saying Zay because there's also Marvin. Zay Jones has 6 red zone targets this year, which is 27%. Now, Zay's ADOT is 6.5, and he has 1 deep target so far this year. So it's like, it's a slot type role, even though Kirk is their slot receiver. Jones runs about 33% of his routes from the slot. So he's an outside receiver, but he has the workload of a slot guy. But is there enough here for you to consider Zay Jones in a game where you're stacking the Jags, aka potentially next week?
Yeah, he also got a rush, which we love to see.
Ooh, Curtis Samuel had red zone rush this week, by the way. Just thought I'd let you know. -2 yards, but he got it.
Yeah, Zay's apparently was in the red zone. I did not see that one that I recall. But yeah, it's a good workload. The ADOT team. Yeah. The ADOT specifically this week, 3.7, but still 2 downfield targets of 10 plus. Good red zone roll. This might be the type of week where I just sell out on particular game stacks because the odds of a lot of games being terrible is quite high. Mm-hmm. And so if we get like 3 games that sort of pop off, it's really not the kind of week where I think I'm going to be dispersed all over. Mm-hmm. So probably going to be more open then to value guys in the games that I actually like than trying to force guys in games where they might score like 27 total points.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty receptive to him. I think that Zay Jones, with his current workload, entering a game that I'll probably want to stack, I would say that combination is worth like $5,800. What would you say?
Yeah, I think I could not get there if there was a 6 to start that salary.
There's not. It's a 59. So it's like appropriate. But like, so what I would say, and this is probably not something I would have said prior to this week, but what I would say now is that Zay Jones is worthy of game stack inclusion at $5,900. I think.
Yeah, especially. So we didn't talk about this with Devonte Smith, but he's up to 6,900 and AJ Brown's 8,300. So if you can sort of pair those together with a Zay, like that cuts down those salaries a good bit. So I think that's reasonable.
Christian Kirk, 6 catches in each game so far, 14.7 FanDuel points in each game. He's great. He's 76. So it's high and like, but it's justifiable.
Yeah. Scored again this week. Love to see it. Hate to see it after I talk about touchdown rates regressing. However, it's not about not scoring the next week. It's about being more average. And
his average is going to be astronomical because he's the best player of all time, and Trevor Lawrence is great. Yeah. So
it's a lot of vindication though on this show because we loved him with Arizona.
Oh yeah, it's about time.
And it didn't always work out.
Cliff, buddy, find a way to use good players. I'm just saying, poor Rondale is going to just toil over there. Anyway, Romeo Dobbs or Robio. I was worried about saying his last name wrong, and it's butchered his first name. Romeo Dobbs was the wide receiver 1 for the Packers this week with everyone out. Dobbs ran 94% of the team's routes, 8 targets, 24% share. He had 2 out of 4 red zone targets as well. 8 out pretty low at 2.8 yards. But could you see yourself getting to Romeo Dobbs if this role were to stick?
So they play the Patriots next week. Total again, 41.
Well, it's Brian Hoyer though, so remember that there's more shootout potential now.
Sure. But yeah, the 8 targets came in a game where, look, let's say, a similar quarterback to what they saw last week projected for this week for the Packers. So it could be similar game script.
Brian Hoyer equals Tom Brady? Question mark.
Tom
Agreed.
Brady with
he was
nobody to throw
They
to.
played together for a long time. They're basically the same.
Yeah.
Okay. Don't hedge it. Don't hedge it. Commit like me. Come on.
I mean, very clearly, everyone has to know that's a joke. But
no, don't hedge.
Yeah,
come on,
like,
this is disappointing.
It's fine. The roll, the low A dot is a little bit problematic for the target share being 24%, which is normally good for a receiver. If it's tied to such a low A dot, you have to catch all of them, which you did. You got to kind of do a little bit after that. You got to score. So it's more of a like offensive volume expectation thing, and I don't project that to be substantially different next week.
Mm-hmm.
And what like overall could be like a similar game where there's not a ton of points. So I would guess after scoring, after catching everything, probably get bumped up a bit too much for my liking, but that's kind of how I'm viewing him.
So how would you put his, I want to hear salaries for him, Lazard and big shot Bob Tonyan, who had seven targets on 21 routes this week.
This is tough because I didn't give this team any thought. So
I'll go first then. Okay. I would put Dobbs at 59. I would put Lazard at 56. He actually had a higher ADOT, but I don't think that's just going to stick. I'd put big shot Bob Tonyan at
Lazard actually had a higher ADOT than 2.8.
I know.
Are you sure?
Honestly, I'm surprised because Lazard's kind of like a 2-yard ADOT kind of guy. So I was a little bit surprised, but like, Bob Tonyan will go at.
Wait, was he 48 last week?
I know. I should have considered him. He didn't burn me, but I should have considered him. I used freaking Irv Smith like a moron. I used a lot of Ertz, so it was fine. But like, I'm a moron. I would say Tonyan 53. So 59 for Dobbs, 56 for Lazard, 53 for Tonyan.
Sure. I might go like Dobbs 58, Lazard 57. I think it's a little bit closer just based on if Dobbs isn't going to like push for double-digit targets, he has to do literally everything right. He has to catch every single one of those targets.
Well, I don't think that role is sticky, though. I think that he actually has downfield juice, even if he wasn't used that way in this specific game.
Okay, we'll see.
From a player archetype perspective, he is someone who could get downfield work.
Okay, yeah, but this is just not what we saw.
Right, but that doesn't mean that you can't assume that a 2.8-yard ADOT will be his role in perpetuity at Deebo Samuel. So like I feel he had 2 deep targets in week 1.
Who do you expect to have a better downfield workload? Okay, so 2 questions. Dobbs had a 24% target share, Lazard at 18%. Do you think those are about correct?
No, Dobbs will come down.
And do you think Lazard's will go up at all or stay around 18?
Yeah, I'd say they'll probably both be flirting around 20%.
So then what we're looking at is similar target volume, but one guy projected to get a lot more air yards on those.
I don't think I wouldn't project it that way, though, because Allen Lazard's player archetype is not downfield bomber, whereas Dobbs is more of that.
Okay.
So, like, I'm not basing it off of what we saw necessarily in one game. I'm basing it off of, like, archetype, and Allen Lazard is like a...
Lazard has a 13-yard ADOT this season.
On, like, 3 targets. Or 9. 10 targets. Dobbs had 2 deep targets in week 1.
I'd rather have Lazard.
Straight up? I would probably favor Lazard straight up, but
after like, all that.
But it's not by much.
Yeah, if you gave
me like plus 130 odds, I would consider betting you straight up that Dobbs outscores Lazard the rest of the way. Plus 130. Half PPR scoring.
The question
points per game.
The question was Lazard or Dobbs, whose like role do you like better? And then you said, here's why Dobbs' role is going to get better. Lazard's is going to be worse because
I think that Dobbs has more room for being.
Yeah, like obviously he has more room to grow from a 2.8-yard ADOT.
I'm not talking about from that. I'm talking about from like his actual like ceiling potential is higher
than Lazard's.
Yes. Lazard is like the boring.
But yet you need plus 130 odds to take that.
Yeah, because median it's about median. It's not about average. That's what betting is. So medians.
Okay. Well, I like Lazard still. I'm probably not going to get tempted by Dobbs.
Bet me then. Plus 130 that Dobbs outscores him the rest of the way.
No.
Why? Because you're a coward. Come on. You can do this. Come on.
No.
Bet me. Bet me. Bet me. Bet me. No? Okay. Lazard is 6,000. Dobbs 59. Robert Tonyan is 49. I can get behind that.
All right. I'll take the bet.
Yeah. Okay. Plus 130. That Romeo Dobbs, rest of the season, points per game, FanDuel points per game, will outscore Allen Lazard. Plus 130 odds in my favor. Let's party. Let's go into situations to monitor, other stuff that stood out to us in week number 3. Brandon, what did you note when going through usages from Sunday?
Jonathan Taylor's role is still fine. Just kind of checking in on the former best DFS player, from a year ago, the guy that we had to play all the time. 77% snap rate, had more routes with 23 than Nyheim Hines with 19. Had 5 targets, the Hines is 6. So it's good, but the results haven't been there, and that could be a little bit scary. But it's also, Taylor was really boosted by churning out big plays and scoring at a high rate by having an elite, unmatched historical, not unmatched historical, but one of the best historical red zone rates that there have been. This offense is not quite looking great, so that's kind of where we are with Taylor. Don't want to write him off completely, but just kind of making a note there. Similar situation, Derrick Henry, 6 targets on 14 routes, played 73% of the snaps, 20 carries, but just 1 of 3 red zone carries, with Tannehill getting the other 2. Don't want to forget about him. Really, these guys are not role changes, so we don't get into them more deeper, but just checking in, I guess. Cam Akers' role made it look like he separated a lot, with 12 carries over Darrell Henderson, who had 4 carries and a target, but they did each play 50% of the snaps. Akers was more involved in the red zone, 4 carries to 1 for Henderson, but Akers just 3 routes, 14 for Henderson. I think we're probably always looking for these backfields to start to split, and based on simple production and volume, it looks like that was benefiting Akers this week, but still pretty narrow. So I'm not going to be chasing Cam Akers just yet. The Browns, I talked about Amari Cooper week 2 recap, or we talked about him. Another good usage game. If you look at just the past 2 games for this team, Amari Cooper has a 36% target share and a 64% air yard share. David Njoku is at 26% of the targets, 70% of the air yards, but we're looking for tight ends with pulses, and Njoku could be that guy.
Are you going to roast me or no?
What's that?
Are you going to roast me or no?
For what?
For Thursday, you were like, I should consider Amari Cooper at MVP for single game. And you're like, he's projected to be on 1% of rosters in the MVP slot. And I was like, no, people will chase it. He's dumb. And then he was the highest scoring player in that game.
Yeah, that was.
I brought it up for you. Don't worry.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But basically, we're seeing Cooper treated like a true alpha wide receiver 1, which we did not in week 1. So while we're never going to love that offense, that is something that you can't just write off.
Cowboys could use a guy like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Another sort of similar situation, Deontay Johnson has a 32% target share and a better than average ADOT, actually. Better than receiver average, I should say. 11.1, receiver average, again, around 10.5. But just hollow production, despite the 122 air yards per game. I'm not ever going to love Deontay, but if the salary starts to scale back a bit, maybe.
I'm going to let him burn me first. I will get burned for not using Deontay Johnson before I use Deontay Johnson.
That's fair. Traylon Burks ran a team high 27 routes, but had just 2 targets. So just kind of something to. I was looking at routes for rookies and see what happens. I don't really know if he's ever going to morph into a DFS viable guy in this offense this year, but we'll see. DJ Moore, just checking in on our guy. 100% of the routes so far this season, but just a target on 20%.
The fact that you're checking in on him is more than Baker Mayfield has done. So thank you for that. That's very considerate of you.
I'm getting targeted on just 20% of those routes, which is just completely forgettable. So yeah. Kyle Pitts, 70% route rate in week 3 with 8 targets, which is 42%. Super high ADOT of almost 19 yards. 6 of his 8 targets traveled at least 10 yards downfield. Route rate, was down from 82% before that. So kind of conflicting, but Kyle Pitts not dead yet, especially with some downfield work. You love to see that for a tight end. And we already talked about this one, but Jelani Woods with the routes being 11 and the 2 touchdowns on 3 targets, not something to chase.
I wouldn't totally ignore it. Like, don't use him, but like, because like he's a rookie, he was apparently terrible in training camp. So like the fact that he's earning snaps now is noteworthy and like being productive. So it's at least, and he has juice, which they don't have as a team outside of Jonathan Taylor. So
that's why we're monitoring it.
Yeah, exactly. So don't write it off entirely, but like don't use him. So keep an eye on him for now. Josh Jacobs' role was pretty solid again. He ran 24 routes and had 6 targets. That was with Brandon Bolden being active this time. Obviously no Hunter Renfrow, but they did drop back 46 times. But honestly, I've taken Josh Jacobs in my brain and bumped him up like a half percentage point each week so far. And that happened again this week. So at least slight improvement. Still tough to trust a Buffalo back, but Devin Singletary, a good usage again, or good usage. I shouldn't say again. He had good usage Sunday. Again was incorrectly phrased. He played 74% of the snaps, which means he played about 97 snaps. He had 11 targets. Part of that was the fact that they had, I think, the most dropbacks in the past like 10 years or so or whatever. But, that's not bad. 74% snap rate for Singletary.
They also ran like 80% of the plays in that game.
Yeah.
Give me a salary because Singletary's in that Baltimore game.
74% snap rate, hollow production. Could have his role go back to where it was, like 57.
He's 62.
Okay, that's too high.
Singletary or Dobbins in that game?
Dobbins.
I'd go Singletary.
You want to do a bet?
Sure.
Okay. I'll do even odds for that.
Singletary might have 10 more targets than Dobbins next week.
And Dobbins might have 1,600 more rushing yards than Singletary in that game.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah. Has Devin Singletary gotten 100 rushing yards yet this year, like aggregate? Let me check.
I don't think he's gotten double-digit carries yet.
He's gone 48, 19, 13.
So no.
Rushing yards? No. Okay. Okay, so we have 2
But
bets.
yeah, you take that, you apply it moving forward. That's always the case.
Correct. Singletary tied Stephon Diggs, the team's lead in targets, but it was Isaiah McKenzie in second with 9 targets. Gabe Davis had 6 in his return. Even if McKenzie is not like a full-time guy, he's taking targets away from Davis. I think that Davis works in game stacks for next week, but Diggs might be the one guy here who's attractive outside of game stacks. I do want to ask you, have you seen enough of McKenzie to consider him in game stacks, or is it just Diggs and Davis?
I don't know. I mean, I didn't really trying to pull up that final play, but it looked like McKenzie tried to cut up field instead of just getting out of bounds. And so I wonder if that's gonna like not bode well long term. So again, we don't really try to like factor in all that off field stuff, but
you probably should though.
Probably not a ringing endorsement. Yeah, he like tries to cut. He gets kind of
watching it right now.
Yeah.
It's funny. Yeah, I think Davis will probably be fine for game stacks, but not like great for game stacks. He is
Wait, Davis for game stacks?
Went down to 65. That's better than I thought it, because he was 73 and like he's gonna get like 6-7 targets a game. So 65 though is pretty sick.
So he didn't play week 2, but in week 3 he had a 94% route rate. Stephon Diggs 70%. Week 1, Gabe Davis every route. Stephon Diggs 76%.
Okay, but like targets,
because
Diggs just gets breathers because he goes hard,
Yeah. So
target share in those 2 games, Davis is at 13%.
So
it's
here's
below
what
McKenzie and it's below Singletary.
So in those 2 games, 96% route rate for Gabe Davis. What'd you say his salary was?
65. So I think his salary is too low. So
that game, if he's going to be on the field running routes.
Yeah. I thought he'd be game stacks only, but at 65, he actually does extend beyond that.
Yeah.
That might be a write down salary, honestly. I thought I'd be low on Gabe Davis, but they pushed him down. Yeah. They pushed him down low enough where I'm on him again. So good for you guys. Thank you. McKenzie's salary is set 59. So like pay up for Davis at 65. And he does have appeal beyond game stacks. Suddenly.
And it's not like some guys who maybe run routes and very clearly are not parts of the offense.
Mm-hmm.
Gabe Davis.
Gabe the Babe. We can call him by what he prefers. Gabe the Babe.
4 downfield targets per game, and those did have an end zone target in week 3.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, that's a write-down salary almost.
Okay. Chase Edmonds scored twice, but Raheem Mostert still led the Dolphins in snaps, 59% to 41%. I'm not touching anybody there. Justin Jefferson had his second straight down game. This time, 6 targets and 14 yards. I think it referenced this before, but it might be because Jeff Okudah was shadowing him. If you look at PFF grades, Okudah is not going to pop, but he did keep Devonte Smith in check in week 1, held Jefferson in check week 3. Jefferson ran 78% of his routes lined up against Okudah. So Okudah's looked pretty good so far. I'd note that for both wide receiver ones facing the Lions. If you think that Okudah shadows, maybe bump them down a bit, but also Jefferson might be more susceptible to wide receiver cornerback matchups this year because I think he's running about 33% of his routes in the slot or so. So consider that a bit more maybe. Amon-Ra St. Brown missed a few snaps due to injury Sunday. Helped Josh Reynolds have a nice game. 10 targets, 5 of those were deep. DJ Chark had a pulse, which was nice, but just 6 targets there. So I don't know. I think that Reynolds and Chark kind of cannibalize each other behind Amon-Ra, and it's probably more so just go Hawkinson or Swift or whatever if you're not going with Amon-Ra. We were already pretty low on Antonio Gibson after last week, but should probably be lower now. He did get out snapped by JD McKissic in a hyper negative script. Just 1 target, which is a season low. Gibson, 3 out of 9 red zone chances, but his appeal is very low outside of a positive script, which hard to bank on with stuff. Travis Homer had a rib injury in this game pretty early for the Seahawks, and Rashad Penny ran 24 routes without Homer. I still don't want that backfield, but it makes them less cross-offy if they might actually luck their way into a target or 2.
I think we talked about that before the show, and I didn't think it was relevant, but I still don't think it's relevant.
Okay. Philosophical shifts for this week. This is one is not something that's happened yet, but I would expect the Jets to be more run heavy next week with Zach Wilson likely to make his debut. I would expect him to be more run heavy both for his health and from an offensive acclimation perspective. Joe Flacco dropped back 56 times again Sunday. He might have had 50 dropbacks in all 3 games, which is absurd. Their early down first half pass rate is 58%. It helped Elijah Moore get 10 targets with 7 deep on Sunday, but I think we're going to want to scale back on the Jets passing game, view them as being more run heavy until proven otherwise. So we were on Garrett Wilson at least a bit in general. Are we off that now with Wilson assuming starter roles in week 4?
Yeah, it's a good week too. A good matchup to sit out.
Mm-hmm.
That game has to have a very low total, I would assume. 41.5, I guess higher than I thought. But yeah, against the Steelers, I don't really think there's enough there unless what's Wilson's salary? Not Russell Wilson.
Garrett Wilson or Zach Wilson.
61.
Yeah, we're checking Zach Wilson's salary,
right? 65.
Nope. Even the first game with Jimmy Garoppolo, the 49ers, basically 50-50 rushing and early downs in the first half. That hurts the passing game a bit, but they also lost Trent Williams with an ankle injury. If he were to miss time, and he does have a high ankle sprain, it sounds like, it would hurt the efficiency of the passing and the rushing game, and it might keep George Kittle into block more, which would suck. So it seems likely that Williams misses time. So what's your view of the 49ers passing offense with Garoppolo, but potentially no Trent Williams?
Yeah, didn't love what I saw from Garoppolo. Hard to love when you see someone giving Dan Orlovsky some company by running out of the back of the end zone, but I think the Ayuk connection is at least legitimate. So I'd say the arrow's up on Brandon Ayuk. The George Kittle situation, it's tough because he's got to help out more. That left tackle who came in, not to put anyone on blast, kind of didn't flash a lot. I did play some left guard in middle school, but I'm not an offensive line expert.
Right guard's better, baby.
Yeah, it is. Left guard was the weakest position. That's why I played it. I didn't want to play football, but I got forced into it, so that's why. But I played left guard, so I know
right
a thing or two.
Right guard all the way.
But yeah, I think the arrow's got to be, not that it was up on Kittle, but definitely not up anymore.
Yeah,
maybe a little bit down. but I probably didn't like it anyway.
Yeah.
And then Debo's Debo. I mean, there's still a chance that he has a big game. 5 carries this week, 8 targets, stellar 6.8 yard ADOT, 3 downfield targets out of 8. I'd say down on Kittle and Debo and up on Ayuk a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Okay, you had some notes on some pass rate and pace stuff. What'd you see there?
Yeah, just jotted some things down. Even with their injuries, part of this was trailing, but this helps adjust for that too. The Buccaneers played at the fastest week 3 pace among teams that have played so far, had a pass rate over expectation of plus 4.2 points, with a raw pass rate of 78%. They saw the largest adjusted pace jump from week 2, so I think that's at least noteworthy. Maybe they'll be fun if maybe they'll just go a little bit de-gaffy if Brady can stay upright and just start chucking it once Mike Evans comes back. And then 2 fun teams, I would say they're both fun, sped up this week. The Eagles, in week 3, they were a better than average pace, ranked 17th entering the week, 8th this week so far. Their pass rate over expectation also jumped, which you love to see. Maybe that was partly due to like piling it on like Carson Wentz, but if that stays, that's really fun because Jalen Hurts, despite contrary belief, can throw the football a bit. If he's going to throw it more, it's also going to help him run more because then the defense would have to play back. It's a whole thing, Jim, with defenses. But the Chiefs also sped up this week. I think that's noteworthy. We're 21st. Well, no, but we're going to need volume for everyone other than Kelsey to make these like receivers viable. They were 7th in pace this week, up from 21st. And then 2 quick things. The Vikings, because this affects some stud pass catchers, Vikings pass rate over expectation scaled back to below average this week. They were 6th entering the week. And then the Bengals ranked 3rd for the week in pass rate over expectation. They were actually below average entering the week. So there's that.
And I think that'll continue because they can't run the ball. It's like that's what we've seen with Miami. That's part of why they're so pass heavy. I think we might see a bit more of that with the Bengals as well, which would be a good thing from a DFS perspective. Let's go to our salary scroll, pulling up the week 4 main slate over on FanDuel. We'll start off at quarterback. Scroll down there and shout out anything that stands out to you.
Oh, boy. So we got Josh Allen at 89. Lamar Jackson.
I don't have to scroll to see Jared Goff. Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
So we have Josh Allen at 89, Lamar Jackson at 88, Jalen Hurts at 86. And then it bumps down to Justin Herbert at 8,000, depending on what his health is, maybe. Then Kyler Murray, he's probably going to be at 78 forever just to tempt us.
Yeah.
But it is going to be the question of the week of, do Allen, Lamar, and Hurts pop off? If they do, it's really going to be hard to replicate that. And if you want to fade it,
I think we go to a guy I talked about last week. He was 7,000. He's up to 75 now. But Trevor Lawrence is actually in play for DFS, I think. They weren't as pass heavy this week, but it's in part because they actually got a lead right away. They got a pretty good team. I do worry about that Eagles defensive line because they were a monstrous unit against Carson Wentz. But Trevor Lawrence is better and twitchier than Carson Wentz. So I think he's at least like he has I have to look into him a little bit more. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to running back. Shout out what stands out to you there.
That's quick.
Well, we're already at an hour and 35 minutes.
No, I know, but that's okay, so
Saquon is 81. Why is that? That's way too low. He's going to go off tonight. His rushing plus receiving prop is 107.5. And I was like, oh, I should take the under. And then I looked at his usage, just like, oh, I shouldn't. No, I don't. I shouldn't do that. That was a lie. $8,100 is too low. Saquon is a write down for me.
I could see that. Short week, but that's about it. James Robinson at 78 is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Aaron Jones at 73 jumped out to me.
He fumbled on the goal line.
So
just to spite me. Yeah, I know. But I needed those points. I don't care about the usage going forward. I wanted the points. Khalil Herbert, 72. We talked about that before with the Montgomery situation. If Monty can't go, that could be enticing, but it seems like he will. Javonte at 69. I have not dug in enough to that game yet, but 25 adjusted opportunities again last night. 15 carries, 5 targets. That might be interesting at 69.
I don't know.
What was his snap rate yesterday? Great question, Jim. You should look it up. I will. Thanks for asking. Snap rate for Javonte Williams was 44%.
Yeah, I remember I was watching that game with my wife.
My wife.
Yeah, and it was a train wreck. So we were making fun of it, but multiple times I was like, "Why is Mike Boone on the field?" Like
Mike Boone's awesome. Let's not.
But look,
let's not just disparage Mike Boone in the process here.
They have 2 guys who they need to split work between. Why are they throwing in Mike Boone as well?
Don't poop on Mike Boone. Sorry, that's 7. Okay.
Honestly,
anything else?
No running backs are jumping out to me.
Saquon.
Maybe.
Saquon at 81. I think Dobbins at 58 might wind up standing out because there aren't a lot of running backs who do stand out.
Yeah, maybe.
So
let's bump over to receiver, I guess.
Okay, at wide receiver, not a whole lot. Salaries are pretty low at receiver this week.
One name I want to look for is Rashad Bateman. 66. Okay.
66, not bad.
I just figured it wouldn't be super high because he didn't do much last week.
That whole game seems really stackable. We talked about Gabe Davis' salary at 65. We talked about Dobbins, Bateman 66. Like, you're going to pay for Diggs, who's 87, and Andrews is 84. So it makes game stacks easier. Especially if you don't have the quarterback. Let's say you have Hurts at quarterback. You can still stack this game pretty easily.
Yeah.
Which is reassuring and fun.
2 guys
Drake London's salary is still $6,300.
He might be a write down again.
I'll just use him again. That's fine. I don't care. Okay.
2 guys who could get a lot of volume: Cortland Sutton and CeeDee Lamb, both 68.
Mm-hmm. Don't care about the Lamb part of that. Without Dak, you can't pay me.
Is it really better for Cortland Sutton?
What's that?
Nothing.
Okay. Scrolling down further into the 5,000 range. Treylon Burks is 57, facing Indy. Did have that good route rate. Obviously not a lot of targets, but that means he probably will not be popular. I'm not there yet, but it did get my attention, at least.
Are we out on the Washington receivers now after last week, or is that an overreaction?
Who do they play? Dallas? No, I think that they're viable. Again, Curtis Samuel had a red zone rush, which is all that I require for a guy to be viable for DFS. So yeah, I think that they're still in play. I would say if I were ranking them out, let me pull up their target shares here really quick. I would go, man, McLaurin ain't McScoring any points.
He is not.
He has 10 deep targets, though, and nobody else has more than 6. Dotson has 2 in each game so far, which is kind of nice. What's McLaurin's salary? He is 67. Samuel is 62. Dotson is 57. I don't think any of them are bad plays at those salaries, right?
No, not bad, but not super appealing.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else at receiver?
Dortch at 53.
Yep. Fair call out. Yeah. Unless David Sills goes nuts tonight. What?
It's not a very fun, inspiring slate.
No, I'll be
so
fine.
Far.
Be fine. Perk up, Buttercup. If you are not using Mark Andrews, you are basically betting he fails. Like it's one of those slates because there's no Kelsey on the slate. Darren Waller is on the slate, but is he really?
Yeah, he's gone for over 20 in consecutive games. 7, 11, and 13 targets.
I'm guessing Kyle Pitts catches a lot of steam this week at 61, which means it's probably not a week to use him. I think it's kind of one of those situations like Amari Cooper back when he was with Oakland, where you were like, okay, use Cooper when he's lower rostered than he usually is. I don't think Pitts is someone we want to use as chalk right now.
No.
And Njoku at 57, you talked about his target numbers before. 10 targets this past week, 5 the week before that, facing off against Atlanta. That's not bad. And Njoku at 57.
No, it's not. I'd probably rather play Zach Ertz
At 55.
That could be silly. I mean, it's probably fine.
Yeah. Tunyon is 49. Talked about that before. I think that's low enough to at least be somewhat interesting.
Yeah.
I'm noting this for people who may have listened to Covering the Spread earlier, which I'm not sure how you did. I guess you could listen to this podcast version. Anyway, if you listen to Covering the Spread earlier, the person who will score the first touchdown tonight is $4,100 on next week's slate. Tanner Hudson.
We're already taking so much time. I did not expect that to be what you said.
Well, who do you think it was going to be?
No, I didn't think you were going to bring up a Monday Night Football prop score an hour and 40 minutes into the show.
Yeah, sorry. Tanner Hudson's going to score tonight. 11-1 anytime touchdown. Just letting you know. Just if you listen to this Tuesday and he doesn't score, please ignore me. But just saying.
Okay, this slate's bad.
It's not good.
It's not good, but we'll figure out how to approach it.
Yeah, at least I think the one positive is that the Buffalo-Baltimore game is stackable based on salaries there. That helps. But a note to future me. What are you writing down to future Brandon for this week?
Play Drake London again and probably Gabe Davis. And
for me, it's play Saquon, I think. Depends. Again, this could look really stupid on Tuesday morning, so we'll see. But Saquon 81 did stand out to me as being someone who is undersalaried, and give long consideration to running backs in imperfect roles if the salaries are forgiving, because there aren't a lot of running backs in perfect roles on this slate for this week either. That is all that we have here for this week 3 recap podcast. A lot to cover with all the injuries there for sure. But I think we got through all of it. We'll go through the week 4 preview podcast coming up on Thursday, 10 a.m. Eastern on the FanDuel YouTube page and up on the numberFire Daily Fantasy podcast feed right after that. So make sure you are subscribed wherever you get your podcast. Brandon, people have questions for you on Twitter. Where can they find you there?
I'm on Twitter at Goodwill13, GDULA13.
And I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. I forgot. I had stopped spelling it, and I spelled it again out of habit. I don't know. It's on the screen. If you want, and it's in the description. You can find it. Anyway, I stopped spelling it, but I went back to it. Anyway, cool. At Jim Sannes. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to everyone for tuning in for today. Good luck to you on your Monday Night Football single game slates, whatever else you may be playing. We'll talk to you once again Thursday to preview a fun Week 4 slate. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire.